I know the meeting's still going on, but I think we know enough to see roughly where we're going on this. And so thanks for everybody for joining. And I think it's a good idea that eventually we're going to get Ukraine, Putin, and perhaps President Trump in the same room, and maybe others. I do think that you can't have peace negotiations without the main country that's being attacked at the table. So that was concerning what we saw last week. But we want to make sure that Ukraine's leadership, President Zelenskyy, is at the table when we're doing this. And it seems to me that Russia's demands are that they want 20% of Ukraine that they have, plus a little more area in Donetsk. They want to forbid Ukraine from being a part of NATO, and they had said at one point with no security guarantees from anybody else in Europe or America. And thirdly, they're trying to limit the size of the Ukrainian military. I personally think that's unacceptable, and the president should not be trying to push that agenda. If Ukraine has to give up any territory at all, it should have the right to join NATO or to have bilateral security relationships with either America or other countries in Europe. And I think that's the only way to have a long-term peace is that Europe or Russia has to know that once they make the peace, if they break the peace again, that it's actually war with Europe or whomever Ukraine has these bilateral relationships with. I don't see how you're going to have a long-term peace without something like that. And Ukraine obviously should have the right to have the size military that it wants. It's been a victim of Russia since 2014, and it has to have the ability to defend itself. So, I applaud the president trying to get the two sides together. But I also think instead of looking at it as an opportunity to mediate between two countries at a war, I think the perspective should really be understanding that one nation is the victim, has been invaded. It's been invaded since 2014, and that its cities are being bombed every night. That there's a right nation in this fight and there's a wrong nation in this fight. So we should have moral clarity. What country we're aligned with. We can't be a neutral bystander between two countries, in my view. There's a right and wrong, and we are the leader of the free world, and we should stand by the nation that wants freedom, wants free markets, wants rule of law, and clearly Russia does not. And I noticed some of the comments today about Ukraine postponing its election. It's in the Constitution. And Zelenskyy was rightfully elected in a free election. But after the invasion, their constitution gives them a chance to delay elections until the war is over. Yeah. At the same token, Russia does not have free elections. Today, it came out that it was their last election was one of the most corrupt elections in the world. And we also know on top of that, Putin's murdered all of his rivals. And so there's no comparison between Putin and Zelenskyy on who's on the side of democracy here. I have legislation that it should put on the top of America's agenda to help Ukraine to get approximately 20,000 Ukrainian children that have been kidnapped and dispersed throughout Russia. And so imagine if you're a Ukrainian leader and the areas, the 20% of Ukraine that was conquered, they had families there, and the Russians come in and take the children, put them up on foster care websites for people to request being foster parents of these kids. And it's, from Ukraine's perspective, they'd like to have their children back in Ukraine where they could take care of them there. But this is another just sign of a war crime of Putin, and something that has a long history in communism history. We've seen the Soviet Union do it, China did it, other communist countries would do stuff like this. And it's just a carry on of policy that Russia's had towards Ukraine. I'm reading a book right now called Red Famine, and it's the story of how Stalin intentionally and methodically starved to death 4 million Ukrainians in 1932 and 1933. And you just read the barbarity of the mindset. They didn't care if they killed 4 million people. They saw them as lesser human beings. And but this mindset that you can just abuse the Ukrainians because they're the hillbilly Russians, that's sort of the term that's common in Russia.